Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Jorvik, and in today's video we're going to be ranking the DCEU. I've been waiting to do this video for a while. I kind of want to get back into doing these ranking videos. I did the Marvel, the MCU phases 1, 2, and 3. So if you want to go check those out, there'll be a link in the description. I am working on phases 4 and 5 now that 5 is officially over, and we have Fantastic Four on the horizon, which I think is technically the start of phase 6. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss phase 4, because I think that's gonna be my most polarizing video yet. At the time of recording this, we are just a couple days away from Superman premiering on July 11th. Of course, this is the new start of the DCU with Peter Safran and James Gunn at the helm. Now, technically, we have already had projects within the DCU, the first one being Creature Commandos. I think you can throw in the first Suicide Squad, the Suicide Squad that James Gunn did. You can kind of throw it in there, as well as season 1 of Peacemaker, which is in this tier list because they did technically come out during the DCEU run. So I am going to just kind of throw that kind of disclaimer in there. Obviously, there are hundreds of these videos out there, so probably a lot of my opinions on these films will most likely be the same as other people, but the difference is I'm going to be looking at it from a filmmaking perspective, because as a filmmaker myself, I grew up on these movies just like I grew up on the MCU movies, so there is a lot of, techniques and really cool stuff that are in these films that I think should be discussed. Yes, we will be talking about writing in some of them, but we also kind of cover like acting, we'll kind of cover just overall story, visuals, and I even like to throw in like the score in some of these things, because I do think some of the best superhero themes are from this era of film. As always, if you like this type of content, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really does help out the channel. I have some extra free time now, so I will be doing more and more videos like this. Alright, so let's go ahead and just jump right in with Man of Steel. So Man of Steel is interesting, and I'm glad we're starting with Man of Steel, because it is technically the first film of the DCEU, and it is the first film of the DCU. I did see this film in theaters when it came out. I think, was that 2013, I believe, when Man of Steel came out. I know I went to the theater to see it with some friends, but I think they went to go see an R-rated movie. I don't know what it was, but I was too young, because I was in high school. I was too young to go into an R-rated film, so I was like, well, I'll go see the Man of Steel film, because it happened to be its opening night. And I actually remember like waiting in line to get into the theater to see this film. And I really like this film. It's one of those like guilty pleasure films that I think at the time, like I don't think it's a good Superman film, but I do like it as like an action film. There's a lot of really great action pieces in this. I think the whole final battle with like the combined effort of like the human side with like Star Labs and like the military like trying to stop the world engines, and then you have Superman battling Zod. Like, I do think there is a lot of really great action scenes in this. I even like the battle in Smallville, when like kind of like the first major battle between Zod and the other Kryptonians for Superman. I do like a lot of that. And the first 20 minutes, like that first like 15-20 minutes, the opening on Krypton, I think is also really done pretty well, because you got to remember too, this is back when the time where they took time with CGI. I know like nowadays it's kind of like shoddy, and I've discussed that in like the MCU stuff, and we'll discuss that more in phase 4. But nowadays, they try to rush all these projects out, and Man of Steel, I think the CGI, I watched it recently. I think some of the CGI still holds up pretty well. Of course, that's just my opinion. So let's talk about just Superman as a character. I'm not like a huge, like, I'm not like a Snyder head, okay? Like, I do think I do think that Zack Snyder is a great director, but he is a director in terms of visual storytelling. Like I don't think a lot of his scripts are all that good. Personally, I think honestly, I think his best film is probably Watchmen. But again, that's a whole different conversation. But you have to admit that he is a very great visual storyteller, and I think that's what I like about, you know, like Superman, or that's what I like about Man of Steel, Batman versus Superman, even Justice League. Like visually, those films are stunning. Like he does know what he's doing. I think he started off as a cinematographer first, so I mean that makes sense. And as a cinematographer director myself, movies like these, like his, you know, like Christopher Nolan, and even like, you know, Steven Spielberg and all this stuff like that. Like I do take a lot of inspiration from, you know, these directors, and that's why I think I resonated with these films very early on, because when I was starting my filmmaking career, I started working with cameras in high school, so it was something that I paid attention to a lot while watching these films. But Superman as a character, I think, really fell flat in this, because I do like the kind of naivety that Henry Cavill does portray as Superman. You know, as he's navigating like these newfound powers and all that kind of stuff like that. I do like a lot of the flashback stuff with Paul Kent, and I do think it's a little kind of, I think it's dumb how he dies. You know, like obviously Clark could have easily saved him in the tornado, but you know, it's character development, it's whatever. But it is a dark film, and I think that's why people resonate with like the Christopher Reeve Superman, or resonate with the who's the guy that just played Superman, Tyler, on the CW, the Superman and Lois show. That show, incredible. It's a great show. But like just the optimism that Superman has, and that's why everyone is looking forward to David Cornsweet's version of Superman, because it is a brighter version. It is a more childlike Superman in that terms. But again, different conversation. But in terms of Henry Cavill, I think he does a good job. He looks the part. For me, that's perfectly fine. The suit, I know, is a big contention, because it's like it looks too complicated, you know, and it's not made by Ma Kent, which was like the whole thing within Superman comics. I mean, I do appreciate the added lore, I guess, to like the Kryptonian heritage, you know, making it's not the first time that the Superman symbol has been made to be the crest of the of Superman's family. That's I think they implemented that in the first Superman film in 78 or 79, whenever that came out. I think that's the first time they did that. So it's not like a new concept, but I think the new concept of it meaning hope was new, and that's, you know, it's whatever. It's like not that big of a deal, but I do like the overall design of the suit. It's just, it feels too alien to me, I think. I think if he had a more homemade suit, I think it would be a little bit better. But that's just Zack Snyder's style. Zack Snyder's style is kind of dark, gloomy, more cinematic than it is bright and colorful and all that kind of stuff like that. And that's when we get to Justice League, that was one of the big things with that as well. I do like Amy Adams as Lois Lane. This version of Lois Lane, I think she's probably like my third favorite Lois Lane. But I think my main issue is just the look of her. I don't know. Lois Lane has always had black hair in the comics and other iterations, and that's just like a staple of her. So it is kind of off-putting that she has red hair. Nothing against Amy Adams. I think she's great. I think she does play a good Lois Lane. I think she embodies the character as like this go-getter, someone who will do anything to get the story. She's not afraid to put herself in danger in order to get a story. So like I do appreciate that. And I think really like the other supporting characters are great too. I think Lawrence Fishburne as Perry White is, yeah, I think he's pretty good. He has like that kind of that newspaper chief kind of attitude. And then really I think Michael Shannon as Zod, I think is pretty good. I don't know. I haven't really thought about it. I don't know who could even play Zod now. I don't know. Obviously, I don't know what James Gunn's plan is for the new DCU. If they're even going to do Zod, it would be very interesting. But again, I don't even know who I would want as like a fan cast of that. I think it would be very interesting. But overall, I know the final battle is the biggest thing because Superman kills in this. He does kill Zod. Um, and I know that was like the biggest thing about this film when it came out, and just discussions over, the last decade, really, is why does he kill? And from a story perspective, I can kind of be like, okay, Zod was going to kill innocent people, even though they've already killed thousands of people flying through buildings and stuff. So it's like, what is another group of people? I guess because you can see those people, maybe like Superman can see those people. So it's like, oh, it's a little bit different. I don't know. It's just something that I try to rationalize in my head. But that's the problem with Superman. It's called the Superman problem for a reason. When you have a character like Superman, like Zod, like Supergirl, even, these characters who are literally invincible in this world or whatever, it's like, how do you really combat them? And that's another thing in superhero movies, especially in the early days of the MCU, and even this one, where you have villains who are just copies of the hero, the powers match. So it's like larger than life characters, right? And I think you do have to, bite the bullet in terms of killing one of them off. I would like to do a deep dive more into the Superman problem as I just described, because I think it's something, as someone who has written their own like superhero universe, and I am working on getting it made into a graphic novel, I don't have a lot of those characters who are just invincible and like there's nothing that you can do to stop them. They just do whatever they want, So it is a problem that I think hopefully we can James Gunn has an idea on how to not nerf Superman, but make it more possible that people can, take him out if need be. The last thing I want to talk about this film is the score. I think the score is nothing against John Williams. John Williams is a legend, and I really love that original Superman theme. But there's something just about Hans Zimmer's version of, the score, and like, as well as like Batman versus Superman and then into Justice League. Some of that music in there is just so good. And as someone who loves like classical music and like instrumental, and I love movie scores in general, I actually might do a video on my top 10 movie scores. I think that'd be fun. Hans Zimmer is up there for me because like he's just classically trained. A lot of his scores do feel like they were compositions from Beethoven and Bach's era. So it is really nice. I remember when this film came out, I bought the soundtrack, and there it was. It's like 2 hours long, and I would just listen to the just like, I love it. I love it so much. I do still listen to it like regularly, like every once in a while I'll throw it on. Anyways, with that being said, I don't want to spend too long on these movies because there is a lot of movies to get through. For me personally, I think Man of Steel is for the universe they were trying to tell, right? For the plan that Zach had for this franchise. I do like this movie. Like, is it a great movie? No, not even close. It's just there are elements in it that I really do enjoy. So for right now, this list might change as we go on, but for right now, I'm going to keep it at like an A. Again, this is supposed to be in context, not comparing it to the MCU or other superhero movies. This is just the context within DCEU. So for me, I think it's one of the better films in this, and we'll talk more as we go on. But for right now, it's going to stay at an A. Okay, so next up, we have the next film in the franchise, Batman versus Superman. Now, this one is interesting because I don't, like most people, I don't like the theatrical cut of this film. I do think the extended cut is infinitely better than the theatrical cut. And that's just because a lot of the scenes that were cut out are, they are filler scenes, but they all also provide some context to what's going on. For example, at the beginning, a lot of the stuff with Jimmy Olsen was cut out, and you don't have that context in the theatrical. So like later on when you find out that, like, oh, that was Jimmy Olsen, that doesn't even make sense. There is a lot of context in that film. There's also a side plot where Lois is investigating the bullet that was used during the beginning raid, and she goes to a separate scientist who, she's the one who discovers that the bullet was manufactured in a way, and like she thinks that it was Lex and all that kind of stuff. So like it adds a little bit of context to that kind of plot line. There's a lot that was just cut away that I do think provides a lot of context. But again, just me personally. Just like Man of Steel, I do really like the visuals of this. It's Zack Snyder, so a lot of like the visuals of like Superman flying around saving people, where they're having that debate on should Superman even be involved with the world in like that kind of stuff like that. And we discussed this when we talked about Civil War in my Phase 3 video, that because this came out like a week or two after Civil War, or before, I couldn't remember. Honestly, what a time to be alive. But it is interesting, when you have these superpowered people, what does that do to the world politics? And that's something that I do appreciate with Civil War and with this film as well, because that's something you don't see a lot in superhero movies. I mean, obviously we're seeing it now, with a lot of the MCU stuff and like how that's been handled, and then of course in here with Superman and how he's handled in this, being seen as an enemy, being tried for his crimes in the Battle of Metropolis against Zod. I do find that very interesting. And it's just I mentioned this in a completely different video, a world building video that I did on how to create your own superhero universe. You want to check that out, link will also be in the description. Because in my superhero universe, I also dive a lot into politics and how real world politics can translate into your fictional worlds, and how having superpowered people can change a lot of things. And it's really important to flesh those things out, but again, to me, that's just because I'm a world building person, so I really like that aspect of this film. Of course, we finally get Batman, and I'm gonna be honest, like I do like Ben Affleck as Batman. I do think in this movie and in Zack Snyder's Justice League, which we'll talk about later, but I think his bat suit in this, chef's kiss. It is honestly probably one of the best bat suits ever put to screen, and I will say that with whole chest. It's inspired by The Dark Knight Returns, which is a George Miller comic from, I want to say, the late 90s, maybe earlier than that. I'm not sure off the top of my head, but it's about an older, more seasoned Batman, which is what he is. So in this world, he has been Batman for 20 years or somewhere close to it. He's already had a Robin. Presumably there was a Nightwing out there. He's battled the Joker and like all these other villains. We never get to see them, unfortunately, except for the Joker and Harley Quinn later on. Really been interested to see like what like Scarecrow would look like in this universe, what Penguin would have looked like in this universe. We do get Deathstroke. Again, that's later on though, but we don't really get to see a lot of Batman villains. And I mean, obviously, I'm in the camp that we should have got a solo Batman film first before we got the, Batman versus Superman as the second film. But again, at this point in time, DC and Warner Bros., they were just trying to catch up with Marvel. And so, like, I kind of understand, but at the same time, it's like you miss a lot of storytelling potential when you just skip ahead and you just like, hey, here's all these new heroes exist now. We also get Wonder Woman in this film as well, played by Gal Gadot, and we'll talk about her film in a little bit. And I feel like she could have been left out, and if she didn't get left out, I feel like she could have had a bigger role. She should have been more involved with Bruce and with Superman, and not just show up at the end to fight Doomsday. And we'll talk about Doomsday, but overall, I think this film suffers from the lack of just direction, and a lot of that comes from Oh, we also get Jesse Eisenberg as Lex Luthor, and when they first announced, I remember when they first announced him as Lex Luthor, I was skeptical, and then they released that photo of him with the shaved head, and I was like, okay, like I can kind of see it. Like to me, Lex Luthor is more of like a big, imposing, type of man, like he is like in the comics and you see in like the animated series and stuff like that. But obviously in live action, we've had Gene Hackman, who I thought was a good kind of campy Lex Luthor. We had Michael Rosenbaum, who I thought was a good early version of Lex Luthor. He was in Smallville. Of course, we're getting Michael Holt in the upcoming DCU as Lex Luthor. And so far, from what I've seen from the trailers and some clips, I do like his Lex Luthor. It's just that right amount of cocky, that right amount of evil. Again, I haven't seen the film yet. Obviously, I'm filming this right before the film comes out, so I have not had an opportunity to see it yet. So maybe my opinion will change. It'll come out, but so far, I like what I see when it comes to Lex Luthor. And in this film, they make him feel like more of like kind of like that Silicon Valley, like young millennial, old Gen Z type of ADHD. Like they made him look like maybe he's like autistic or something. Like the way that they directed Jesse to portray that character is very interesting to me. Like he's kind of schizophrenic, which is also like an interesting choice. And it's one of those things where like I would have loved to have like Man of Steel 2 where we get introduced to Lex Luthor and we get to spend more time with him. I think would be interesting, and then he becomes just a recurring villain in this, but unfortunately we didn't get that. Same, it's the Batman problem. But like it is like interesting choices are being made. I think the other big thing with this film is that Batman does seemingly kill a lot of people in this film. One thing I didn't mention is the beginning of this film is Bruce Wayne's perspective of the Metropolis attack, which I think is also just. I think the opening of this film also really really good, and it's something that Zack Snyder loves to do. It's like he can make really great sequences, but they're like short films, for Man of Steel, the opening of Man of Steel, great. The opening of this movie, great. And it's just let's carry that through, Zach. Come on, let's carry that through. I do like the initial meetings of Batman and Superman, like respectively. The first like on-screen reaction doesn't even happen until an hour into this 3-hour film if you're watching the extended cut. And if you do decide to watch this movie, watch the extended cut. It is better than the theatrical, just IMO. And it's like insane for a movie called Batman versus Superman. They don't even fight until hour 2, and it's like they've only like met like twice, and it's kind of crazy. And I think like with Zack Snyder, he has to build out this world. So we do have to spend a lot of time just building out Bruce Wayne's character because we haven't met him yet. We have to build out like Alfred. We have to build out the scenes with Wonder Woman. We have to build out, more scenes with Superman and how he interacts with the world. And, like with Lois, because I didn't mention this, but in Man of Steel, Lois Lane and she knows that he's Superman like right away, and so they're already like a thing, and it just like we have to spend more time with their relationship and like kind of catch up because it is like 2 years later or whatever, like 18 months or whatever it is. And so there's a lot of storytelling that needs to be told, and that's the thing with Zack Snyder, and other directors do it too. There's the show don't tell, and they really do like showing, which it's something I can appreciate. But also it's like, okay guys, we have to get the plot moving, like come on. And that's the one thing, like that's why it feels like a rushed film. Like even though it has a 3-hour runtime, it does feel like so much happens in this film where it's like what, like it feels like two films stitched together. And that's just my thing with it. As far as supporting characters, we don't really have a lot of new supporting characters. I mean, really, Alfred. I do like Jeremy Irons. He's kind of like this sassy gay Alfred, which I love. And he seems more like militaristic, more like on hands than previous incarnations of Alfred that we've seen, which is something I can appreciate. We do get hints at other like villains in this. We have Cage Beast, which is one of the henchman for Lex Luthor. And of course that there's the infamous setting up Justice League scene where we get our first hints at Aquaman, Cyborg, and the Flash, which I think is cool in concept, but I think they should have saved that. I would have rather have that scene as an end credit scene. You know what I mean? Like I do think it that part right there was just like, okay, well now like obviously you're setting up for Justice League, so like what's up with that? I do think it like like I said, I think it's interesting. Like if there's all this like found footage of like all of these metahumans around the world, I do think that is like an interesting setup. I do. It's just the execution was just not it. Like it felt like it was shoehorned in there. And of course we had the dream sequence scene, which is basically like what the original plan for this universe was going to be like their end game was going to be Darkseid and like Apocalypse and all that kind of stuff, and then like the parademons taking over and like all that kind of stuff like that. So we have that nightmare sequence where Superman is on Darkseid's side, so we do see a little bit of that evil Superman, and we see more of it in the Zack Snyder's version of Justice League. But like they do so much setting up in this film that it feels like it's not about Batman versus Superman. Like that's not what it is about. Like yeah, they have the fight, which I think is cool, you know, but it's still just it's over in like 10 minutes, you know, and it's like, come on now. Personally, I think we should have had a Batman solo film right after Superman, which could have taken care of a lot. It would have taken like half of this movie away into that Batman film, and then when we got to this film, like so like the way that I would do it if I had the opportunity to go back, I would have kept Man of Steel. I would have taken half of Batman versus Superman, made that into a Batman film. That way we can explore those characters more. And then I would have had the solo Wonder Woman film. We could still keep it how it is in World War One, and then like I think maybe like a modern day, like half modern day, half flashback to World War One. I think that could have worked, but I do like Wonder Woman. We'll talk about it in a second. But and then I would have had Batman versus Superman, Dawn of Justice. I probably wouldn't call it Batman versus Superman. I probably would have called it just Dawn of Justice. And then it could have just focused on Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman. And that could have been like the lead film into Justice League. Like that could have been like, you know, prequel Justice League like 1 technically, and then Justice League like proper would be them finding Aquaman, Cyborg, Flash, kind of like how they do, fighting Steppenwolf with Darkseid or whatever. That's how I would have done it, and that's how they should have done it, but they didn't. So you know, it's whatever. Anyways, enough talking. Let's talk about just like the final fight. We'll talk about Doomsday. Too early for Doomsday. I'm sorry. What are we doing? It's Doomsday killing Superman. Second movie in is insane choice. Do I think the fight is cool? Sure. I think the design of Doomsday is so dumb. Like I know like in the comics and like in other iterations she's just this big hulking monster, which sure, you know, how do you translate that to live action? But still, it's just like I know the more damage he takes, he gets more of that bony look, which is fine. I think but come on, you still could have tried a little bit harder in the design phase. Again, the music in this, Hans Zimmer knocks it out of the park. I love that opening like Batman monologue and like that the opening credits of like the Batman origin. I do love like that music, that track. Knocks out of the park. There's nothing more to say than I haven't said already. Let's talk about the Martha scene. And I remember I defended this scene many years ago. I was talking about it with I was on a podcast many years ago, and we were talking about like superheroes and stuff, and I talked about this scene. And it is stupid. It is a stupid scene where, you know, he said save Martha. Obviously Martha is Batman's mother's name, and so it's like it is like a meme. And I was trying to explain it to someone. I was like, well, you got to think about it from this perspective, right? Like, yes, it's a dumb scene, but if you think about it, this whole time Batman has seen Superman as this alien threat, you know, something that he needs to stop. And the second when he's like, hey, you need to save Martha, there's that connection, you know, obviously, because like I said, Batman's mother's name is Martha as well. And when he says, why did you say that name? Lois Lane comes in, she says, it's his mother's name. I think to Bruce, he's like, oh, this, he did grow up on Earth. He has a mother. Her name is Martha, just like mine, so that's a connection. And I think it was supposed to be more dramatic than that. Like on in script format, I'm sure it was more impactful. But I think to me that was the scene where Batman realized that Clark, Superman, is more human than he is. He is more human than most people. You know, like he has a right to be on this planet. You know, like that was me trying to rationalize that scene. And that's kind of like how I viewed it, was like, oh, this is the first time that Batman sees Clark, like sees Superman as Clark, as, you know, a human. I don't know. You can say what you will. It is kind of, it is dumb. I'm sorry. It is dumb. But like, that's just how from a storytelling perspective, that's just how I envision it. Overall, I do like Man of Steel. I do have like a soft spot for this film. Again, I don't think it's as good as Man of Steel. I think there's just too much going on. It's too clunky. It's too just meaty. Like there's too much content and too much world building in this. I think it could have been two separate films. But with that being said, I think it's probably a B for me. It's definitely not. Actually, I don't even think that it might be. It might be a C. It's hard because there are things I really like about this film and things I don't like about this film. And I think a lot of those, it kind of outweighs the bad, just because of just how my brain works and how I visualize these films. So right now, I'm gonna keep it at B. Obviously, most people probably put it at F tier. I don't have an F tier. I don't care that much, so we'll go ahead and just keep it there at B. All right, moving on to probably one of the worst films in this franchise, and that is Suicide Squad. This is directed by David Ayer. This is the first film project that wasn't directed by Zack Snyder. Obviously, still in the same universe. Ben Affleck makes a cameo in this. We get introduced to a lot of villains who are already established in this universe without there being any other superheroes. This is also the first time. I mean, that's the first time because obviously we just had it in Justice, but we get a full Flash cameo, Ezra Miller as Barry Allen in costume. But we also get Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn, which I think is great. But I think there's just been too much Harley Quinn, so hopefully we don't get Harley Quinn for a while in the DCU. We also get Will Smith as Deadshot. You know, I like that character. We have Jai Courtney as the Boomerang, Captain Boomerang. Sorry. You know, Joel Kinnaman as Rick Flag Jr. We have Killer Croc, which is an interesting choice to me. Katana. And then, of course, we have some throwaway characters like Slipknot, who they have to kill off, you know, right away. And then probably the worst casting in this is Jared Leto as Joker. I don't know. I've mentioned this before. I don't like Jared Leto. I don't think he's a good, like, actor. I don't know what. I think he's a good singer. I'm not going to deny that. But I don't know what he has, like, over Hollywood directors and producers to keep putting him in stuff. It's just, I just don't understand it. I think his best role is probably in Blade Runner 2049. He is playing a character in the upcoming Tron Ares movie, which I did a reaction to some time ago. And it looks cool. I do. Hopefully that film is good because I like those Tron movies. But yeah, dude, him as Joker, not it. I'm sorry. This movie terrible. I know that David Ayer has talked about having his own director's cut for this after the success of Zack Snyder's Justice League, because apparently to him this movie was going to be a lot different than what the studio cut was. And I think a lot of the issues with this film also was the company that edited this film was a trailer editing company, and obviously editing trailers is a lot different than editing a full film. But it would explain why the trailers for this film were actually pretty good, and the way that they advertised this film was it being like Guardians of the Galaxy, because this was a couple years after the first Guardians Galaxy movie. And so they're playing it off as this band of misfits, and then like playing all of these different tracks in the trailers, that's what they were trying to do. And obviously in the film, it's like there's a needle drop like every 5 minutes of just some new song that has nothing to do with what's going on. And I think as compared to James Gunn's The Suicide Squad, it's just a completely different vibe where the music in that makes sense. Same thing with Guardians. The music in Guardians makes sense. And it's just sucks. I'm sorry. We do get Viola Davis as Amanda Waller, and I like her as Amanda Waller, and I'm glad that she's going to continue that character into the DCU. But my main issue with this film is just how disjointed it is, and I think having characters that we have no previous knowledge of, that we kind of have to learn their origins through flashbacks through this movie. Again, it's the Batman versus Superman problem, where like I would have loved to have a solo Batman film with Joker and Harley and maybe Killer Croc, and like introduce and like Deadshot, introduce those characters in there, and that we know a little bit about them, and then they get recruited into this film. Like there's so much that they could have done. There's so much that they could have established these characters. Like they could have made like Rick Flag like a Nick Fury, but for supervillains. Like if we had a solo Batman film, and Joker and Harley were in that, and Joker, maybe they were like, we don't want him, he's too crazy, but they go to Harley and they say, hey, we're putting together a team, like I think to me that would have worked way better. Also, the supernatural stuff, and it's too early for supernatural stuff. Okay, like you have like this Aztecan god, with Enchantress or whatever she's from, and like I think some of the visuals, of her are pretty cool, but like when you get to like the final battle where it's all these supernatural demons, and like her brother or whatever is just like this big CGI hulking monster, and you're just like, what is going on? And like to me personally, I think this film should have been way more grounded, no supernatural elements at all. Have the Joker break out of Argus custody, and then maybe he takes over a carnival. Final battle is like at a carnival with Joker's hitman and like there's so much they could have done differently. And it's just one of those things, like films that like I wanted it to be good, but it is not. And like there's really not much to say about it. Like it's just the acting, I think more or less is like whatever. I do think the best scene in this film is probably the second act low point where they're all in the bar and they all kind of go through their origin stories, or we learn more about them. I think that's probably the best written scene in this film. But other than that, sucks. I mean, and the only character to really carry over, well, there's a couple. The only characters to carry over were, Amanda Waller, Rick Flag, and Harley Quinn. Like those, like really the only like we never saw Killer Croc again. We never saw Deadshot again. We never saw Joker again. Katana or well, Diablo died, but we never saw these characters again. And I mean, like I said, there's not really much to say about this. It's just Joker sucks. I'm sorry. Like this gangster, like kind of Peaky Blinders Joker they were trying to go for just was not it, Chief. I'm sorry. But obviously this film's gonna go in the C category, and it's so bad. Honestly, it'll be low C because there'll be other C films here, but it's one of the worst films in here. All right, next film on the list is Wonder Woman, S tier. I really like this film. I think the only thing about this film is just the villain, Ares. I think that whole ending fight is... There's some cool visuals, but it's also just too much, I think. And, like, the whole idea of... we get this new world of, like, Themyscira, which is really cool. There's a lot of, like, that kind of Greek imagery into it. We don't fully dive into Diana's backstory, which is fine. We do see the flashbacks of her as a kid and like a teenager, like a young woman or whatever. But placing her in like a World War I setting is so interesting to me. I mean, there's been previous like incarnations of Wonder Woman where we see her in like World War II. We see her like in the Korean War, like during the 50s. We see her in like that's what drags her into the world of man. is these wars. And so seeing her in World War I and fighting with Steve Trevor, we have Chris Pine, who I really liked, and just the entire supporting cast. I think this whole crew of Vanguard crew that she has, I think is pretty interesting. I think there was a theory that one of the members of her crew was also like a Native American god, which I think is interesting, but nothing, never explored that, which is whatever. This was directed by Patty Jenkins, and I think she did a great job for this. I don't know what happened with 84. We'll talk about it later, but I don't know what happened with that film, but this film I think is pretty good. I do like that suit. Personally, I think that suit is a little too revealing, but it's whatever. It's clearly a Wonder Woman suit. It has the same issue I think that the Superman suit has, in that there's too much going on, because they make it look, it's more like armor than it is like just like a breastplate. And like I know that's kind of like a stupid thing to say, but like it just doesn't look like realistic. I don't know how to explain it. And like I know it's just like a coincidence that her armor is like red, and basically red, white, and blue, like it is in the comics. It is kind of like insane. And I think in the comics they explain that the reason why she has like a red, white, like an American style suit is because of Steve Trevor. I'm not a big Wonder Woman comic reader, but I think like she took on like the iconography of his flag. So if you know, let me know. I think that's kind of like what it is. Hans Zimmer came back to do this. So let's talk about Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman herself. I do think she has the look, but me personally, I think she's too skinny. And I know that sounds like a misogynist thing to say, but like to me, Wonder Woman is like Superman. She is like buff. And so I think like if we had like a bodybuilder, who was like clearly like she has muscle, like she is Wonder Woman, I think would be a lot better. My opinion, obviously. I know there are a lot of freaks out there who hate buff women. Honestly, grow up. It's not that serious. But anyways, I do like the suit. I do like her overall look. I don't think Gal Gadot is a great actress personally, but I do think out of all of the movies I've seen that she's in, I think this is probably her best role. But other than that, eek. Like it is pretty good. Steve Trevor's, Chris Pine's good. I can't think of anyone else who's in this movie. That is one thing that is kind of forgettable about them. We do have Dr. Poison, who is like a secondary antagonist, and there's the German general who is like they think is Ares, but it's not. It's actually some guy in like the British Parliament, which is like kind of crazy. I think Ares as a villain is cool. Like he is a villain of hers in the comics, in other iterations of Wonder Woman. I just think they could have done it better, because when she defeats him, it's like the war is all of a sudden over. Like the Germans and like the British are like, whoa, why are we fighting? Like this is kind of crazy. Hey, let's just end this war. Like it makes no sense. It makes no sense. Like these steps that led to World War One are way more complicated than that. Because it did start with the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand by a guy named, I don't remember what his first name is, but his last name is Precept. He was a member of a gang called the Black Hand, and they assassinated him. And then Austria got involved, and then Serbia got involved, and obviously Germany got involved. Then it eventually led to the events of World War One. They just kind of take that history away with just Ares did it, and it's like, what? It doesn't make sense. Other than that, I still think it's a great movie. I think it's beautifully shot. I think there's a lot of cool sequences in this. In this cover here, that sequence where she crosses no man's land from the trenches, I think is pretty sick actually. Where we get her first full look as Wonder Woman. Of course, this film was teased in Batman vs Superman, where I talked about the scene where all of the Justice League members were revealed. The photo of Wonder Woman that Bruce discovered we see it get taken in this film, and I think that's kind of cool. It's kind of nice little continuity there. But anyways, I'm joking. It's not going to be an S tier. It is going to be a high A tier for me. I do think it's better than all of these films combined. It is definitely one of the better DCEU films. All right. I don't want this video to be too long, so we're going to end it. This is going to be just part one. We're going to end it with Joss Whedon's Justice League. What a terrible film. It's just one of those things. Like, obviously we got Zack Snyder's version of Justice League, which, you know, we'll talk about in part 2, but it's just there's a lot of things that happened here. Okay, Zack Snyder, they filmed a lot of this film. Zack Snyder's daughter tragically passed away. I think she committed suicide or something. And so obviously that tore him up, and he was very distraught about it. And I think there was other factors that played too, but I think that's the main one. And then Warner Bros. Was like, well, we need to have a good Justice League movie. And they're like, let's get Joss Whedon. And honestly, Joss Whedon, okay? Like, I can appreciate, you know, Avengers 1 and Age of Ultron, but, like, this film, he, like, put the cast through hell. I mean, like, Ray Fisher was, like, I don't even think he acts anymore, or at least, like, not like this. Like, they really got stumped. And, you know, I'm not going to dive too deep into it because I don't know fully about it. I just know there was some nasty stuff going on set. But we saw a lot of changes in this film, in the marketing. You know, like, there was the first trailer that came out where it was dark and gritty, and then there was a new trailer that came out where it was completely recolored, and just like, it again, it's one of those films where, like, so much of it was cut out. You know, we had to spend a lot of time. We didn't really get to spend time with Cyborg. Well, I think Cyborg got, you know, like I mentioned, Ray Fisher, you know, got the short on the stick, because when we watch Zack Snyder's Justice League, there's a lot more with Cyborg, and I really like that because he's such an interesting character. But we didn't really get anything with, you know, with Jason Momoa's Aquaman. You know, obviously his film wouldn't come out until later, after this film. You know, and we didn't get to spend time with Barry. Like, we met him, and he's just like, yeah, I'm the Flash. And then Bruce Wayne's like, cool, you're on this team. And he's like, oh, okay. You know, like, we didn't get to spend any time with these characters. And I think that's, you know, the huge downfall of this. And then, of course, you know, we have the resurrection of Superman, where he's evil for like 10 minutes. You know, we have Bruce Wayne, who is just a completely different character from Batman versus Superman. He's like, hey, we have to save the world. This is coming, which is cool. I like that. But it's also like, he makes stupid decisions. Like, none of it makes sense. And obviously they did a lot of reshoots for this as well, because, like, some of the footage that was in Zack Snyder, that Joss Whedon shot, isn't in Zack Snyder's version, obviously. In Zack Snyder's version, there's a lot more context that is added to the scenes. Steppenwolf is a lot better villain, but, you know, we'll dive more into that later. But, like, Steppenwolf, speaking of Steppenwolf, I think he's fine as a villain in this. It's just, as, like, a precursor to, like, the invasion of Darkseid and, like, Apocalypse, I think it works. But obviously, a lot of it was just cut out. And, like, the whole thing with Hans Zimmer was not brought back for this film, which I think is insane. They got Danny Elfman, which I can appreciate Danny Elfman, you know, but, like, I'm just not a big fan of his. Personally, he didn't do a bad job with this. It's just like, when you have the established themes of, like, Wonder Woman, Superman, and Batman, and not all of them are even brought to this film, there's no cohesive, you know, like, themes there, and that's a problem that the MCU has as well. It's like every movie, the hero gets a new theme. And of course, like, a lot of those themes were brought back in Endgame, which was great. But it's kind of like something like with Star Wars. You know, Star Wars generally has the same music, so it's more recognizable. Same thing with Harry Potter. Harry Potter has the same music, so it's more recognizable. The original Superman and Batman, you know, which Danny Elfman did, because we hear his rendition of the Batman theme where we see Batman in this film, which is cool. It's a cool nod. Same thing, he also kind of brings in the original Superman theme into this when they're fighting Superman. And I think that sequence is actually not, I think that the only cool thing about that sequence is when Barry is trying to fight him and it's like all slow motion. I do think that it visually is cool. Another thing I really hate is that this whole side plot with like this Russian family makes zero sense. It's something that Joss Whedon added to add like, oh, we have to add stakes to this fight. No, we don't. The stakes are the world is going to end. You don't need to add a family trying to escape because they took up so much of the runtime. Like probably not much, not probably make 10 minutes, but still makes zero sense. There's just so much wrong with this film, and like I just don't know. Like I would have to do an entire. This video would be way too. I would have to do an entirely separate video just talking about why I don't like this film. You know, the pros and the cons of it. But for now, just know that it's not a great film. Actually, it is, I think, worse than Suicide Squad. I would rather watch Suicide Squad more than this original version of Josstice League. I want to be honest, I do kind of like the tagline, "You can't save the world alone," because it utilizes all of the symbols of the heroes, which I think is cool. But there's just so much they could have done. And also, this film is sub 2 hours. Like, I think it's right at 2 hours, which there's so much happens in this that where you need that extra, even the extra 30 minutes, 2.5 hours, I think would have been fine. Obviously, Zack Snyder's version is 4 hours long, which I have watched more than once in one sitting before. So, but yeah, it's just there's so much that needs to be talked about in this film, and I don't have the time here really, because I don't want this video to be too long. But yeah, I think that'll be it for this video, for part 1 at least, talking about phase 1, I guess, of the DCEU. Let me know how you rank these films. Do you agree with some of my critiques? Do you not agree? Let me know in the comment section below. Let's keep it cordial. I know a lot of Snyderhead freaks are out there. I'm just gonna let you know, if you say some outlandish shit, I will just delete your comment. It's not that serious. As always, if you like this type of content, don't forget to like and subscribe. I will be doing a separate review video for Superman. It'll be probably a fandom friendly episode. If you want to check out my MCU ranking videos, link will be in the description. And if you'd like to check out my video on how to build your own superhero universe, link will also be in the description. As always, my name is Jorvik, and I'll see you in the next one.